Right, let's do it. So
Great.
here we are today. Our session for today is knowing your multilingual learners and using multilingual learner research to support language literacy and numeracy development. And to get us started, I'm going to turn it right over to Melanie.
Thank you, Mindy. Hello, everybody. This is Melanie Junkins with the DOE. My colleague Jane Armstrong and I are here to support you. We will be responsible for your attendance, the Zoom links. I did say in the email you would have engine access, and I fibbed a little. We're having a little bit of difficulty getting our videos and our access to that. So for now, by end of day tomorrow, you will receive a copy of this recording to your email directly. You won't need to sign up for anything, as well as the Padlet they'll be utilizing today. And so if you have any questions regarding those topics, feel free to reach out to me. But if they're content directed questions, you will reach out directly to Support Ed. And we're just really thankful that you're here and prioritizing this work.
And my name is Mindy Teach. I'm a multilingual learner coach with Support Ed. I began my career as an ESL teacher and then transitioned into more of a professional development role. And I forgot I have my little all about me slide. Just to share a little bit about my own experience, I really came to this field having experienced travel in other countries and recognizing the challenges that we have when we're in another country and can't understand anybody else and find it really challenging to communicate. And then coming back to the United States thinking, wow, what is it like for our students and their families who are trying to navigate a school system and can't really understand the language? So I decided to go back to school, get a master's in education with a focus on English as a second language. I did all of my teaching in the District of Columbia schools. I worked at a wonderful little school in Columbia Heights, if anybody's familiar with Washington, D.C. And then when my family moved to Pennsylvania, I had to leave and I took a position with a nonprofit called Children's Literacy Initiative, where I did some early literacy coaching. And then I was able to connect with Support Ed. And here at Support Ed, I've kind of been able to put my two areas of interest together and focus on more literacy, but really all strong instructional practices for multilingual learners. And I just want to reiterate what Melanie has shared. I really want to express my gratitude to everybody for being with us today. We know teachers are always busy. Here you are after school. Here we are in January, and I just really appreciate you being with us today. And really, I appreciate what you are doing for the students in your schools and their families. So just a quick note before we really get started, my colleague, Jasmine Singh, will be dropping links into the chat that we'll be using throughout the session. And just so our messages stand out, we always start and end with 3 asterisks. And feel free to drop questions into the chat as we're moving along, or if you need another resource dropped in there. I'd also like to invite everybody, while we're here and working together, if you're able to turn on your cameras, just so we can create our own sense of community. We will have times during the session where I'll invite you to share your responses or your thinking. And if you're comfortable, you are more than welcome to unmute and share. You can drop ideas into the chat. And we'll also be doing some breakout room activities where you can also engage that way. So just a quick look, as I'm sure you know, this is a series. Here we are today, session number 1. And yeah, this just gives you an idea of the different topics that we'll be covering over the series. We also put these icons in the lower right-hand corner of our slides, just so you have an idea of the type of activity that we'll be doing, or so that you know where you can find a resource. So if it's on the Padlet or if it's in the Google folder. So to jump right in here, our objectives for today are to discuss the importance of understanding multilingual learners' academic and non-academic backgrounds to inform effective instruction. We'll be examining some relevant research related to language, literacy, and numeracy development for multilingual learners. Then we'll explore some key principles of second language acquisition, and we'll take a look at some WIDA resources that can support effective instruction for multilingual learners. And then towards the end of the session, we'll take some time so that you can create your own plan to learn more about the strengths and needs of the multilingual learners that you are working with. So again, here is just an image of the Padlet. Hopefully you've been able to access that. And then, here in the first column is where we have the resources for today. And we'll use the same Padlet throughout the series. We'll just continue to add on throughout the series. So you'll have everything there and it will all be accessible to you. And here is just an image of the Google folder. If you click on that link, or if you put that bit.ly link into and access that bit.ly link, you will see a series of folders. Again, one for each session. You can just click right into the folder and that will be the resources that we'll use today. January 22nd. Here is our agenda for today. Really relates to our objective areas. And to get us going, I would like you in the chat to share your name and your teaching role, your county or your school district, and just one reason why you chose to participate in this professional learning series. Let's just get to know each other a little bit. Hi, Nicole. Elizabeth. Okay, great. Hoping to gain new insights, connect with others. Yes, that's great. This is a great opportunity for you all to connect with each other. Again, connecting with other teachers, collaboration. I love that. Okay, looking for some new resources. There's never enough work with literacy. Yes, I agree. Looking for effective strategies. Great. I'm going to encourage you to keep dropping those ideas in there as we're moving along so that you can all get to know a little bit about each other. Hopefully we will address a lot of the needs that you're mentioning here. So we did say that we're focusing on literacy and numeracy. So I do want to start out by taking a look at the Maine State Literacy Action Plan Guiding Principles. And some of you may have seen this before. To some of you, this may be new. Maybe you're seeing it for the first time. So what I'd like you to do is just take a minute and read through this. And then I want you to just drop into the chat any words or phrases that really stand out to you as being especially powerful or especially meaningful. Scrutiny. Wow. Responsive to student needs. Another one, responsive to student needs. Yep. We want all educators to be trained, supported. Fundamental right. Collaboration with families. Yeah, I see fundamental right coming through there a lot. It happens in and out of school, so that really connects with that partnership. Yeah, more fundamental right, partnerships. Great. So now thinking about your multilingual learners, I'm going to ask you to think about which principle you think feels most urgent for them, if there is one that you think really stands out to you. Which principle is particularly urgent for multilingual, that all educators should be trained? Yes, all educators. Yeah, oh, look at that. There's a lot of agreement there on all educators should be trained. Support, grounded in science, the cornerstone of all learning. Yeah, again, all educators should be trained. Great. Okay. So let's take a look now at the Maine State Numeracy Action Plan Guiding Principles. And I want you to go through the same type of process. read through, think, drop into the chat any words, phrases that really stand out to you as being really important, really essential, really powerful. You guys were ready this time. Still, we have every educator across disciplines. Every educator is a numeracy educator. Great. Should be integrated, interdisciplinary. Still need professional learning, collaboration. Yes, it's not just math, right? And now let's think again about our multilingual learners. Is there one principle that really stands out to you as being particularly urgent for multilingual learners? What do we really want to make sure is happening in terms of supporting multilingual learners? This integration, that's foundational, okay. High quality materials, yes. Yep. Professional learning again, the collaboration. We're bringing in families and communities. Yep, collaboration, definitely a priority. Professional learning, working with families. Yes, great, great. So this is a great starting point for us to be thinking about, all these really important pieces of what we want to put into play when we're working with our multilingual learners in these areas. So we're going to dive into thinking about the academic and non-academic backgrounds of our students and how this can help inform instruction. And I always like to start off by giving a little bit of a definition and kind of setting the national scene. So for us here at Support Ed, when we talk about multilingual learners, we're talking about all students who come from a cultural or linguistic background that is not the dominant American. So you can see they're represented here in this purple circle. And then within that group of multilingual learners, there are, we call emergent multilingual learners. And these are the students who qualify for English language development services. So some of our multilingual learners may be learning English. Some of them may be proficient in English. And what's really interesting is if you look at the table over here, we can see that our emergent multilingual learners, so students who qualify for English language development services, account for about 10% of the school-age population. But when we expand that group and we include all multilingual learners, so all students who come from cultural or linguistic backgrounds that are not the dominant American background, it's much larger, and we're looking at 22% of our students. And, even these students who come from different cultural and linguistic backgrounds, even if they're proficient in English, some of their experiences with school might be different than what we typically expect. So it's interesting to look at those different statistics. And then let's take a look at the information that we have here about multilingual learners in Maine. So in Maine, they make up about 4% of your students. And what's interesting to look at over here is the growth that's been happening since 2016. So pretty steady growth, even though 4%, only 4.7% of the population, those numbers certainly are going up for the numbers of students that you have here. So now I would like to share our Support Ed's framework for equitable and excellent multilingual education. And this is the framework that we really base all of our work around. These 5 principles. 1, we recognize that multilingual learners bring many strengths to the classroom. So we're always working from an assets-based perspective. We're looking at what they are bringing that we can build on. We know that multilingual learners learn best when they're taught in a welcoming and culturally responsive school climate. We know that it's essential for them to have language and content integrated in their classes. We don't want to always be focusing only on English or only on content. We really want to integrate those two. We know that it's really essential for students to be engaged in conversations. So we know that it's really important for teachers to find ways for students to have opportunities to have these conversations with their peers. And we also know that MLs excel when teachers, administrators, all school staff really are able to advocate and lead and support for their academic and social emotional well-being. So today's session is really connecting to this strengths-based approach. Today, we're going to really be thinking about what are our students bringing to the classroom. We know that they are coming with academic skills. We know that some students have funds of knowledge, so maybe they have life experience that is not necessarily the type of learning that happens in a classroom. We want to recognize that. We know that it's essential for us to build relationship with students so that we can recognize these strengths and build on these strengths. And it's important, since we know it's important for students to build on what they already know and what they've experienced, we want to try and use their lived experiences in the classroom. So I'm going to ask for a little participation from you here. I'd like you to share your response in the chat around what academic information you already have about your multilingual learners. What do you know about their academic backgrounds? Okay, so I see somebody says, you know what ILAPS? I guess that's a document that you use. Okay, it depends on a lot of factors. You know about their country of origin. Okay, so you might get some information from intake. So maybe you'd have WIDA scores. Oh, the individual language access plan. Thank you for that. And somebody's saying very little to none, depending on documentation. That can certainly happen. We see it happening, particularly on the secondary level. Okay, you may or may not have transcripts, years of schooling. Okay, great. So thinking about the responses that you already provided here, now I'm going to ask you, what additional academic information do you think would be important for you to know? Okay, if they could read and write at grade level in their home language, yes. Fluency in their home language, yes. I see a lot of connections to what students already know in their home languages, their learning experiences, their curriculum background, maybe some additional school skills that they have. What do they understand about numbers? Yeah. How they learned, not only what they learned, but how did they learn? Great. Okay. And again, I'm going to encourage you, keep dropping things in there as you're thinking about them. And actually, we're going to move on to a little bit of an activity, thinking about how well we know our multilingual learners. And this is the first activity we're going to do, accessing a document from the Google folder. And this is document 3. The document in the Google folder is in view only, or maybe it's a forced copy. So you will have to make a copy of the document. What I want you to do is write in the names or type in the names of your multilingual learners from memory, and then see if you can write in at least one fact about each ML that doesn't have to do with academics. So a non-academic fact. And then you can also make note in that last column if you've had a conversation with the student about the fact. And I would just say, we don't have to worry so much right now about comparing your list against your class list, or the reflection questions. Let's just try and see who comes to mind, the students' names, and if you are aware of a non-academic fact about the student. So let's just take about 3 or 4 minutes for this activity. Yes, and I certainly understand on the secondary level, when you're going from class to class, you probably have a very large caseload. So maybe just choose one class that you're working with. Although what a challenge to see if you could remember all 46, right? Yeah, why don't we just take about 30 more seconds? I know you might not have gotten everybody. I think certainly, again, the situation is really different in on the secondary level where students are moving through classes and you might see many, many classes. Um, but focusing just on one class, and let's start just by thinking about listing students' names. How easy was it for you to come up with those names? Did you generally feel like it was easy? Are there certain students that you thought of right away? And you can feel free to unmute if you'd like to. I see some responses coming in the chat. Yes, it was very easy. Great. Okay. Certainly easy if you only have two. Great. Okay, good. So we have students, we certainly have our multilingual learners in front of mind. Okay. Plus it's WIDA time, so they're definitely on your mind. Okay, great. And Kimberly mentions that you have a great connection with your students. So you probably did find it very easy to write their names. What about that non-academic fact? Was it easy to list a non-academic fact about students? Easy. Great. Okay, fantastic. Okay, I see a little bit of somewhat easy. Yes, it was very easy. Great. So it's easy to know their likes and their dislikes. Yeah, when you're talking about 90 students, it's certainly going to be really challenging to know some of their some non-academic facts, and certainly to have a conversation with each of those students about those facts. But, certainly, and many of you have already mentioned in the chat that, part of what's really important to you is making this connection with students. And that's certainly an important part to how students feel about coming to school, but it can also play a role in some instructional decisions that you might make. So that's great that there are so many strong connections with students. I want to share just a couple of other documents if you're interested in collecting more information about your students. This one, and this is also in the Google folder, you can see it there. It's document 4A. This is called What I Know About My ML, and I'm sure a lot of people have devised all kinds of systems and documents for collecting as much information as you can about students. But this is something that you can use, that you can have one place to keep information. You can see here there's some space for English proficiency levels, scores on the WIDA test, but also some place for student interest. So some non-academic facts also there, even some a space there to talk about some student goals, if you know those. And then this tool is somewhat similar, but it's from the student's perspective. So we collect all kinds of data that we often think is very important to know about students, but it's also really interesting to sometimes turn that over to the student and say, what would you like us to know? We certainly have some sentence starters here and some areas where we think it's important to gather information. So you could use this tool for that purpose, but you could also, and here's a cute little example of a student who has filled one in. But you can also do a more open-ended activity where you encourage students to share with you anything that they wish that you knew. So this is just another tool that you can use to gather some information. This last activity that I'm sharing with you here is called an identity portrait. And this has the option of including the drawing, the art aspect of it, and you can also combine that with some writing. So in this type of activity, the student kind of draws themselves and then they fill in information about themselves in the picture. So it's a really nice way. You can see the drawing is split down the middle. It's a really nice way for the student to share sort of what's on the outside, and then on the other side to fill in some things about themselves that maybe are not quite so obvious just by people looking at them. So they can fill in some things that are really important to them. And then, of course, there's the opportunity for them to also write about it. So I would like you now to think about one multilingual learner that you work with. We're going to start to reflect a little bit on what we know about students' academic and non-academic backgrounds. So for this first part here, I want you to think just about one multilingual student that you work with, and then just jot down your responses to the prompts that are here on the screen. So what do you already know about this student's strengths? And what don't you know yet that could help you more fully understand the student? So just take a minute or two, just jot a couple of things down. And then I'm going to give you an opportunity to move into a breakout room and talk about your responses a little bit.
Mindy, while people are doing that activity, wondering, we do have a request in the chat. Can you allow us to make copies of 4B, what I want my teachers to know about me? So just wanted to be sure you saw that request and kind of put that in the parking lot if needed.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, make sure that we can do that. Okay, so I think we can move on to part 2 of this activity. And for this part, as I said, we're going to put you into some breakout rooms. It's just a short discussion, so about 5 minutes. And it's just an opportunity for you to share your responses to the prompts. Think about the missing information or what you think is really essential that would be helpful for you for planning instruction. And maybe think about if there's a tool or a strategy that could help you fill in that information. It could be one of the tools or strategies that I shared, or it could be something that one of your group members has come up with. So this is a great opportunity for some idea sharing. Okay, it looks like we have everybody back. So if there is anybody who would like to share a little bit from your discussion, maybe a takeaway or a topic that you were focusing on, feel free. If you'd rather drop something in the chat, you can go ahead and do that.
I'll say we instantly went to dual identification.
Okay.
And the difficulty with that, because one of our people has that as a current issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's information that you would like to gather. You think that would be
the information you might want to gather in case you have a student who may end up being dually identified.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I see Christy also added in the chat that you'd like some records from their home country. Mm-hmm. Okay. Also touched on dual identification, levels in primary language, how to best incorporate L1, some family backgrounds. Okay, so, a lot of background information that will probably be helpful to really get a full picture of some of your students. So great to start thinking about some of those things. So one of the strategies that we share around really getting to know your students and really being an effective instructor is to be a warm and informed demander. I'm sure you've heard the idea of being a warm demander where, we want to set high expectations, but we also want to help students feel comfortable. And all of this information that we're gathering about students is what helps us be an informed demander. Like, we know that what we're asking of students is appropriate, or it's at their level, or as somebody mentioned in the chat around the L1, we're using their home language appropriately because of what we know about their background. So the more information that we can gather, the better we can be this warm and informed demander, which is essentially going to help us set high expectations for all of our students, appropriate expectations, and help us move towards these goals of students really becoming independent learners. Okay, so we're going to move into taking a look at some relevant research and why is it so important that we're talking about research-based strategies for multilingual learners. The first bullet that we have here on the slide really relates to the students and teachers that are in classrooms. So what we're noticing about students, as we shared with some of the statistics in the beginning, is that this population of students is growing. And yet, in most cases, students will not have a teacher or an administrator or other staff members at their school that reflects their cultural or linguistic background. So, maybe they don't really have an adult that they can connect with in that way. We also have some statistics and information that shows that students, multilingual learners, don't have the same educational opportunities and outcomes. And we're going to take a look at some figures in a little bit. We also know, as so many of you mentioned, that teachers need professional learning. There is not enough professional learning around strategies for working with multilingual learners. We know that we need to keep in mind what's appropriate for students in terms of their social emotional learning, and that it's important for us to also consider their cultural background. So these are all things that we want to be thinking about as we're working with multilingual learners. And to take a little bit more of a deeper look into the educational opportunities, we know that multilingual learners typically score below national average on state assessments. However, good news is that students who exit from ESL services, so former English language learners, typically have better achievement than their monolingual peers. We also know that MLs are underrepresented in honors and gifted programs, and they have lower graduation rates and have higher retention rates than the monolingual student population. So here's a little bit of information about graduation rates, and this is a little bit old. This is from 21-22, but you can see when we're looking at all students, 87% of students graduate. And then when we look at emergent multilingual learners, so students who are learning English, only 72% of those students graduate. And then we have some data here from Maine, and this was more recent, 2024, 2025. For all students, 89.1% of students graduate, but even fewer multilingual learners graduate, and that's only at 67.2%. So that's something to be thinking about when we're thinking about, what type of instruction do students need. Also interesting to look at proficiency on state assessments for multilingual learners, because here the data or the statistics that I just shared with you really come true for Maine. You can see that if we're looking at ELA, for all students, the students who score at or above state expectations is significantly higher for current multilingual learners, but exited MLs surpass all students. So that's impressive. If you look at math, they're just slightly above all students, but still you can see that, students who have exited the program are making the progress that we want to see on state assessments. So let's talk specifically about research on effective instruction for multilingual learners. And you can see here sort of 5 key areas that we know are provide effective instructional practices. And we talked a little bit about some of these. We know that students need to build content knowledge and language together. We need that integration. We want to leverage their home language, anything that they're bringing with us, prior knowledge. We want to recognize their cultural backgrounds and their linguistic backgrounds as assets. So we want to build on those assets. We want to engage students in productive interactions. So those are those opportunities for academic discussions, peer learning opportunities, and students might need direct and explicit instruction, focusing particularly in literacy. So there might be some different areas of literacy instruction that for MLs really need to be very explicit. And then it's also important for us to incorporate regular opportunities for students to develop writing. And it's very interesting to think about that on the secondary level, because certainly the type of writing that students might be doing in different classes could be very different. So really especially important for them to have regular opportunities for that writing. And as we move through the series, we're going to talk very specifically about scaffolding, but we just like to show this graphic just to recognize that throughout all 5 of these research points, scaffolding and appropriate scaffolding is really what's going to make these accessible for students. So we need to be thinking about how we're scaffolding so that students can learn content and language. How are we scaffolding so that they can have these interactions with peers? We're always going to want to be thinking about how we're scaffolding for them. So I want to give you a little bit of an opportunity to read some of this research, and we're going to do this through a jigsaw. So you're only going to be reading one section, and you're going to meet in a breakout room for 10 minutes. And I'm going to ask you to pay attention to your breakout group number, because you are then going to find the slide in document 5 that matches that breakout room number. That's going to be the slide that your group is going to be working on. You're going to choose a recorder and a reporter. You're going to read and discuss the linked research, and then work with your group to complete the graphic organizer on your slide. And I have an image of that slide right here, which will hopefully make this a little bit clearer. So up here, I have the group number. So that'll be your breakout group number. Here in the middle is the research point that you'll be looking at. And this is an active link in your Google Slides. So when you click on that link, you'll be able to open up a couple of pages of information about that particular piece of research. So then once you've had a chance to read through that, I'd like you to think about these 4 different areas. Like, how would you summarize it? What are some examples of ways to implement? Maybe some ways that you're already seeing this happening in your context. And then any connections you can make to research and literacy or numeracy instruction. All right, I think we're good to go. We're going to plan on 10 minutes. Okay, it looks like we have everybody back. So I would like to ask if there's anybody who'd like to share a takeaway from your discussion. Maybe tell us about the research piece that you were discussing and any key takeaways.
We were discussing explicit instruction and a lot about vocabulary. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions we were discussing when the time ran out was how to balance vocabulary instruction in a mainstream classroom where there are students who grew up speaking English and there are some students mixed in who do not know much English. So they're very different levels.
Right. Yeah, definitely something that you need to think about. Great. Anybody else? Key takeaway?
Someone in our group provided an example of effective scaffolding for students to engage with content and language and content-heavy language. And I appreciated that model because I'm familiar with the research. I understand what needs to be done. But even in the example in the document, it told us what the teachers did, but I need to know how to do it. This is tell me how to do it so I can coach my content area teachers in how to do that.
Great. Yeah, definitely one of the benefits of getting into these groups and talking with each other is hearing about people's different experiences and what they can share. Great. I'm wondering if anybody had any great examples of how they're already seeing their practice implemented. Did you get to that point in your discussion?
Sort of. Our group was talking about reading and writing instruction, specifically writing instruction, and how you needed particular structures, and you should teach the structures and then incorporate the writing, assign writing that uses that structure. But we sort of derailed on talking about SLIFE students. But one of the things that would be interesting about that is we were talking about how you have to work with a content teacher so that the content teacher can modify their input to the student so that the student has access to that same input, even though that they've only been here for a little bit of time and their educational background was not as robust as other students educational
Right.
backgrounds may have been, and then all the supports that you can offer as an ML teacher, and that eventually the content teacher will learn to offer as well. Meaning, SLIFE students, students with limited or interrupted formal education. So it's in Maine, the definition is, I think you have to be third grade or higher, and you have to be at least 2 grade levels below in either literacy or numeracy. So you can't be a SLIFE student if you're a kindergartner, but you can be a SLIFE student if you're a 6th grader and you only went to school for 1 or 2 years in your home country. And it's not your fault, right? That your math skills are at a 1st grade level. You didn't go to school. It's not your fault. You're a SLIFE student. So we still got to figure it out how to get there.
Right. And certainly that collaboration with the classroom teacher is going to be very important. So it's an important thing to bring up. Thank you. Okay, so what we were looking at were just some general effective practices for working with multilingual learners. And again, just because our topics here are literacy and numeracy, I just want to take a quick look at what we know is really essential specifically when we're thinking about literacy development for multilingual learners. So again, that scaffolding is going to come up. We need to scaffold that instruction in context. We need that integration of language and content. And again, specifically on the secondary level, we really need to pay attention to discipline-specific features and elements. So, what's the vocabulary that we specifically use as a mathematician versus a scientist? What type of language structures do we use in these different disciplines? But all students are going to need continued oral language development. That's how they're processing what they're learning and thinking through what they're learning. This leveraging of cultural and linguistic assets. We're going to need to think about background knowledge. It's really important to activate and find places where we might need to build that background knowledge. It's really beneficial for students if they're working with a relevant and inclusive curriculum. So what they're learning about really matters to them and they can connect to it. And then just again, that emphasis again on continuing to provide opportunities for writing instruction. And then looking at numeracy, and again, I know we've already mentioned how numeracy is not just math, and numeracy is happening across the curriculum. But oftentimes for our multilingual learners, they may not always be able to express what they know because of a language barrier. There may be some language demands in their numeracy instruction that prevents them from showing what they already know. So again, these pieces that we have around instruction that they've already had, what they know in their home language, can be really helpful for getting more of a full picture of a student. And this can also be a case where, if students do have experience with a particular concept or topic, the use of the home language can be a really important support for them. Okay, so let's take a look at some information around second language acquisition, and we'll take a look at some WIDA resources. So first, just talking about second language acquisition, it's the acquisition of a language other than your first language. And we're also thinking about how learners create a new language system within their exposure to that second language and how they're constructing the rules when they are learning that new language. You might notice as students are sort of trying out language features, that they're kind of creating in their heads their own rules based on what they've already learned. Sometimes they work in English, sometimes they don't work in English, but that certainly tells us, or at least that gives us some information around where students are in the acquisition process as they're trying out some of these different language features and trying to apply rules. There's been so much discussion around the rate of language acquisition and this concept of social language proficiency versus academic English proficiency. So many students show social language proficiency between 3 and 5 years. So this means that they can carry on conversations, they're okay on the playground, in social situations. but they may still struggle to use academic English in their content classrooms. And this may take 4 to 7 or even more than 7 years for students to really feel proficient in using that academic English. So I'm going to just do a quick overview of the stages of second language acquisition and then connect them to the WIDA level. So students who are beginning students, these are just some of their characteristics. They may not be talking at all. They may go through the silent period. When they are speaking, maybe they're just repeating simple sentences, short phrases, simple sentences, and they may be doing more listening than speaking. So these students typically fall within the entering and beginning stages when we're looking at the WIDA levels. So then we have our intermediate students expanding on their sentences. Maybe they're speaking in complete but simple sentences, some complex sentences, increasing vocabulary. Their fluency in social situations sounds much more developed, but they continue to need support for the academic language that they need in their classrooms. And these are students who fall into the categories of developing or expanding. And then finally, the advanced students sound fluent in all contexts. They're really proficient in social and academic language. We really don't notice a lot of errors, but certainly they may continue to have an accent, which is perfectly fine and just may always be that way. And these are students who fall into the bridging or reaching levels on the WIDA, from WIDA assessments. So I want you to think about these stages. Think about the multilingual learners in your classes, and in the chat, share where do you think they fall in the stages of language acquisition. And I know you have many students, so it may be across the spectrum for you. Okay, so we have some beginnings, some ranges, beginners and intermediates. Okay, a lot of intermediate, okay. Some that are in each, all across the spectrum, intermediates. Okay, great. So we certainly have a variety of levels of students. And how do you think understanding second language acquisition can inform your instruction? Even just knowing the numbers of years that it may take for students to become proficient, I think is really something helpful for a lot of teachers, but also thinking through these stages, how can that inform your instruction? It's interesting, Elizabeth's comment about the WIDA access scores don't seem to align with what you see. That's interesting, and we'll take a look at that. Scaffolding might depend on their levels. It makes it simple. Okay, great. Definitely a resource that you can look at. You have an idea of what's to be expected, what to look for next. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's take a look at some WIDA resources. And many of you sound like you do already have a lot of experience with WIDA, but let's take a quick chat poll, and you can just drop the number in the chat that best corresponds to your familiarity with WIDA. Oh, I see a lot of 5s. Excellent. 4s, a couple of 1s, maybe some people who are new, some 3s. Okay, great. So some people really super experienced, but also some people who are just beginning. Okay, great. So just a super quick overview of WIDA. It's a consortium of states. I believe now they're up to 43 states. They provide an English language development standards framework, which shares standards that we can be working towards with students, but also some language development tools that can assist in making some instructional decisions. They also provide the famous Access for ELLs test. So we gather some information about their proficiency at one point in the school year. And one thing that certainly is important to know about WIDA is that they also approach this instruction from an assets-based perspective. So WIDA, through their documentation and through their standards and through everything that they provide, is really looking at what students can do and what we can do as instructors to move them in proficiency. So to move them to the next level of language proficiency. So we're going to take a look at just a couple of tools and resources today, just a brief look at the framework. And then I'm going to give you a chance to take a little bit of a deeper look into those proficiency level descriptors. And I'm going to show you just a little bit of an access score report. If it's not something that you've seen before, it might be interesting to take a look at that. So as I mentioned, there are ELD standards, but this is really the entire framework. So we have standards around what we might expect for students at different proficiency levels, but also at different grade levels. And then across disciplines, WIDA provides some key language uses. So in their study and their investigation, they found that there are particular ways that students tend to be asked to use language in different classes. So they share some of those. And then based on, again, different proficiency levels and different grade levels, we can set some goals for how we want students to be learning that language. And those are the language expectations. And all of that leads into these proficiency level descriptors, which is really this continuum of language development across all 6 levels. So what does it look like for students when they come in or when they're scoring at a level 1? And how is that language progressing across all the levels until, level 6? And this is just an image here of the proficiency level descriptors, and you will have an opportunity to take a look at them a little bit more deeply. But again, it just shows, what we might expect from students at the end of level 1, and then moving into each of those different levels. So it's interesting to take a look at these and to really look into them and think about, what needs to shift and change and be developed for them to move on to the next level. And then just a quick look at an access score report. This is for an individual student. And what I really like to point out about this access report is that students are receiving scores in each of the language domains. And if you look at those scores, there can be quite a bit of variability. I see you're shaking your head like, wow, this is really unusual. Very unusual to see a student scoring a 4.7 in writing and lower scores in some of those other domains. But this is just an example. But it's something that we want to think about, because often when we're talking about access scores, we're talking about this overall. We're talking about this 3.6, which actually, that sounds pretty high, 3.6. But then when we look at where they are in listening and speaking, they're still kind of hanging out in this level 2 land. So we want to be thinking about how we're supporting students to move in those language domains. So it's important to take a look at all of these scores across the domains. And then this just kind of goes along with the report, giving the proficiency level, again, making note of what students generally can do at each of these levels. So, like I said, I want to give you some time to explore these proficiency level descriptors. So I'm going to give you 12 minutes in your breakout room. And actually I have, 4:18. So I think that would be really a good amount of time. Again, you're going to find the slide that matches your breakout room number. Linked in each slide, I have proficiency level descriptors for 6 through 8 and also 9 through 12. So when your group gathers, you can decide which ones you'd like to look at based on the levels that you work with or the majority of the students that you work with. So again, please select a recorder and a reporter. Take a look at those proficiency level descriptors and then think about some of the questions that are on the slide. And I'll just very quickly show you the slide here again. So, just get a general reaction to the proficiency level descriptors if there's anything that just surprises you. And the second column, really noticing how is that language growing as we're moving from level 1 to level 2? What kind of shifts are you noticing in the complexity? And then just a general thinking around how you can use this information from an Access individual student report along with the proficiency level descriptors to plan for instruction. And I would just say, certainly keep in mind the comment that we already saw in the chat that sometimes what we see happening in the classroom doesn't necessarily align with what's being shared with the Access scores. So any questions about what we're moving into here? Okay, so let's go ahead and move into our breakout rooms. All right, welcome back, everybody. So let's debrief a little bit the activity that you just did. Is there anybody that would like to share anything related to the first question about any insights you gained about how your multilingual learners use and develop language? And if you don't like that question, you can share a little bit about what your group really focused on. Maybe one of the other questions really stuck out to you, really resonated with you.
Is it okay to come off mute and share?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay. Our group talked quite a lot about understanding. We looked at the 9 through 12 proficiency level descriptors and understanding that, for example, what a student can do at the end of level 1, it is really going to rely on the appropriately scaffolded piece, which is just a little line at the top. But I think when you understand what that means, and then we had a really good long conversation about what is appropriate scaffolding versus, just having a translating app at the ready, which is a great tool, but it's not scaffolding. But I think we had a nice mix of someone who's fairly new to the WIDA concepts and also a classroom teacher who's just saying like things that are not going well in her instruction right now, and ways that hopefully this course will bolster her ability to have, a handful of really strong tools that will help with the challenges of not having the training to support and scaffold for multilingual learners, and having 70 students in the school and 1 ML teacher, which is what a lot of us are facing.
Yep. And I just love that you had that variety of roles in your group and that you could have that level of conversation. I also appreciate the mention of translation because it really is a tension that's happening a lot. Like on the one hand, people feel like we have these resources. They're like right here at our fingertips. Like, why don't we use them? But I also appreciate your comment that, we need to really think about, is that really scaffolding? Like every time, if we're always turning to that translation, is that really the appropriate scaffold that we want to provide for students? So sounds like you had some really great conversation. Yes, I see a hand. Tatiana.
I just wanted to speak to the insights about how multilingual learners use and develop language. In my experience, it's a deeply personal and individual journey.
Yeah.
All of them, there are no two paths that are similar.
Mm-hmm.
Very different, even within families, even if you compare siblings. It depends on the person. It does depend on instruction, but it is a deeply personal and individual journey.
Yeah. And it's certainly not always linear. Like we don't always see students necessarily going from level 1 to level 2 and all of these things. So yeah, definitely. And this is why a lot of times when I talk with teachers, I share how important I think their own observations and their own anecdotal notes are around how students are learning. And again, the Access assessment is a test on any given day. It's a snapshot, so it's not everything. Any thoughts on how looking at some of these documents might impact how you plan for your literacy or numeracy lessons moving forward?
If I can step off mute for a second. Um, as the not multi-language instructor in the group that is the music guy,
Yeah.
um, just a operating familiarity with these descriptors and with the scale that WIDA categorizes our MLLs is, I think, just looking at it and getting eyes on the paper, I think is beneficial because half
Mhm.
the time I feel like I don't know what I am looking for in the student to recognize their what they lack or what they don't lack in the literacy
Mhm.
department.
Yeah.
So just getting eyes on it itself has, I just from this one session is something that is helpful because now I feel like I can just diagnose some bare principles of what I can do to help them.
Great. Yeah. Certainly a starting point and certainly a place to look at like where next steps might be. So great. Thank you for sharing that. I do want to move on to our last section here. And I know that you all know that in between sessions, we're going to be doing these interim activities. So I want to just introduce this activity here, and then, like, depending on where we are in time, maybe you'll have a few minutes to think about that and how you might plan for that. And it's really going to connect to some of the things that we've talked about today, particularly around how or noticing whether access scores really connect to what we see students doing. So between now and our next session, what I'd like you to do is to gather some non-academic information about your multilingual learners. If you don't already have it, many of you sound like you already have quite a bit of non-academic information. Take a look at their access scores. And then I have a tool that you can use to kind of chart proficiency levels. And then I want you to be noticing what is happening in the classroom, particularly around how students are using language. And then the final piece is to share the reflection on the Padlet. Now, many of you have already shared that you have large numbers of multilingual learners. So I think it makes sense to identify maybe one class that you're going to work with and focus on them. Not realistic at all to be doing this for 46 students or 52 students. So again, the tools that we share today might be something that you use to gather that non-academic information. Maybe it's something else that you have. It doesn't have to be one of these, but certainly these are options that you might choose. And then you can use document 7 in your Google folder. You will need to make a copy of this. And this is where you can add information that you've collected about their access levels. So the document is basically this chart, and it has a space for listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So what you can do is, just list names of students where they fall in each of these categories for each of these domains. So if you have a student who's a level 1, you would enter their name in this first box. If they're a level 4 in listening, you'd put them in this box. And this just kind of gives you a visual of where your students are falling on the access. Okay. So then the next thing that you can do is to jot down some notes. So maybe you have a student who's listed here as a level 2 emerging in reading. Just jot down some notes around how you're noticing that they're using, particularly around speaking, like how are they using language when they are engaged in speaking type activities. And then compare those observations with the proficiency level descriptors. So again, maybe the proficiency level descriptors said, students are speaking in complete sentences, but simple sentences. Maybe your student is speaking in complex sentences and putting several sentences together. So that's an important observation for you that, your student who is scoring at a level 2 is doing some types of activities that are more aligned with like a level 3. So that would certainly impact how you're thinking about instruction and scaffolds that you might be providing. So then the last thing I want you to do is just to go to the Padlet and just kind of write up a short, notice how short this is, a short reflection. Okay. So just think about, are there any particular insights that you gained around your multilingual learner's strengths and needs, thinking about how it might impact your plan for instruction. And you might even already be thinking about some specific supports. If you're not quite sure what those supports are yet, that's perfectly fine. In our next few sessions, we're going to be talking a little bit more about scaffolding. So that will give you some additional ideas. But really the goal is to be looking at, those scores, what you're noticing in the classroom. Is it correlating? And can you draw any conclusions about what you're noticing? So any questions about this?
And for those of us who don't use access scores, like I don't have access scores, so I would just kind of fit them in or figure out where I would place those students.
I would say maybe for you, the most important piece would be to just be noting some observations. I think you can still use that form and note some observations around how students are using language, what you're noticing.
Yeah.
Or maybe this would, I'm not sure if this would really connect with you. I know that we also have some people who are on today who are not in teaching roles or maybe don't have direct access to classrooms. So you might want to think about what systems or structures need to be in place so that teachers are able to do this. Like, do you have a system already in your school where all teachers get these access reports? Are they able to see this information? Do you have a system where we're sharing information around what those proficiency levels mean? And then think about if there are tools or resources that you would recommend to colleagues or to staff and why you might recommend those. And you can just add that reflection to the Padlet if that makes sense. So we do have a couple of minutes now. I would say maybe about 7 minutes before we want to really start wrapping up. And I did want to give you a little bit of time to think through, process what we have talked about today, think through maybe some steps that you might take to start planning for how you're going to do this data collection. So I'm going to leave it to you if you would like to just take, about 6 or 7 minutes of your own quiet time to reflect and process. We will also open up some self-selected breakout rooms if you'd like to go into a breakout room and talk it through with a couple of colleagues who also want to join a breakout room. And then I would say we will reconvene at about 4:52 just so we can wrap up. And I'll also be here if anybody wants to ask a question. Yeah.
So there was a question, a really important question about PII, some personal information. So if we're sharing our documents, should we be changing the students' names on the work we do? And so I said I would reach out to you, but my thought is yes, that we would not want to be sharing personal student information. So initials and also thinking about anything that could be identifiable, sharing spaces.
I'd say initials make sense. And I'm not asking you here to share any of those documents. Like maybe you have access to those documents. We don't all need to see those documents, which really is why we're using document 7 to collect all that information. So if you prefer, just use first names, you can use different names. If you can use just initials, that would be fine. And someone is asking for the link to the Padlet. Jasmine, are you able to share that, to drop that in? Thank you so much. Okay, so if people want to, feel free to turn off your camera if you're working independently. I'm just going to ask everybody to come back at 4:52. And then we'll close up, finish up the session. And there are some breakout rooms open. You should have the option to select one if you're interested in meeting with others.
Jasmine, could you put the reflection questions also in the chat again? Oh, there they are. Thank
Yep,
you so
I'm
much,
gonna go
Mindy,
back.
for putting them on the screen. Kathleen, they're coming your way right now.
I have a quick question. So we're supposed to, if we teach multiple classes, multiple levels of multilingual learners, how many students are you looking for us to do this work on?
So I really want this to be meaningful for you. I don't really have a specific number of students, so I don't know if there's one class that really stands out to you around, oh, students are really struggling to move, or sometimes I'm not really sure the best support. So maybe if there's a particular group that, for you makes sense to really focus on.
Okay.
Maybe choose that one.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
And another question. And
Sure.
at the top of document 7, it says the information about MLs in your class. So that's where we're putting our non-academic information that we know about these MLs.
Yes. And again, that can be generic. I don't need names and, like several students love soccer. It doesn't have to be, really identifying.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I know that was a really short amount of time for planning. Hopefully you had a little bit of time to think through some of the resources and maybe, just think through like which class you might be working with or some ideas. Yep, and let's just invite our people who did join a breakout room to come on back to the session. Great. So just to conclude for today, I would love to hear a little bit of your own reflection. Is there anything that shifted in your thinking today about supporting multilingual learners? Or is there one particular action that you really feel ready to try? And again, feel free to unmute, feel free to drop it in the chat. I already see ideas coming into the chat. Reminder to take advantage of translanguaging. Great. Yeah. So translanguaging, when we encourage students to use all the languages that are accessible to them. ML students need so much practice in all domains. Yeah, we definitely want to make sure we're hitting all of those domains. Focus on specific structures and pre-writing. Yeah, great. And Gretchen feels ready to build better non-academic connections with and among students. That's great. And I love the way you added in among students as well. Really important to also help our students feel comfortable with each other. You know, this is a great idea. Find a way to observe students in classes outside of your content area. Consider ML's past experiences. Okay, great. And again, feel free to keep dropping those in the chat, just in an effort to make sure that we end on time. I'm going to move on to our wrap up. Hopefully we met our session objectives for today, to discuss academic and non-academic information about our students, to examine some research, to explore second language acquisition and some WIDA resources, and I'll say to begin to create a plan for implementing some of these resources. Does anybody have any final questions? Okay. Just a quick reminder, our next session is February 26th. And again, your next steps are to complete the interim activity. I will be sure to send up a follow-up email that, again, outlines the steps, and I will also include those considerations that you might want to keep in mind for your reflection. You are more than welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions in between. My email is right up there, and the very last thing I'm going to ask you to do for me is to please provide some feedback on today's session. I do read all of these evaluations, and I do take into consideration what you share in there, because it's really important to me that the session meets your needs. So please take just a minute and complete that evaluation.